Hi guys. So, you've read the title, you've clicked the thumbnail, you know what's going on here today. But I wanted to say, this video is one that has been, I don't want to say in the works, because I haven't, been actively working on it, but it's been in the background on my to-do list for a very, very long time. Literally, ever since the newest generation of strawberry shortcake, the current one, was announced way back in 2021. And the reason I waited this long was because I knew, dolls and toys were coming for this new generation, right? Of course they were. And I wanted to be able to include them in the video. And it was announced that Moose Toys got the license to produce strawberry shortcake dolls, and so I figured, sure, they're right on the horizon. I'll wait till we see them and put this video on the back burner until then. So, spoiler alert, they never showed up. So now, literally 2 years later, I'm just going to make this video and hope that they don't miraculously appear like 2 weeks from now. I just mentioned this because obviously a lot of videos have already gone up about this exact subject from other creators, and I want to be clear because some people get really offended when two creators have similar topics. I'm not copying, I'm not writing any coattails. I want to make good on a video idea I had 2 years ago because it's literally been driving me crazy. So, who is Strawberry Shortcake? The icon, the legend, the queen. Well, if you must know, Strawberry Shortcake is a character and the mascot of a huge global multimedia franchise that includes greeting cards, animated movies and cartoons, merchandise, and, of course, dolls. She first appeared in the early 1970s and has since then gone through quite a lot of different incarnations, which is pretty normal for a toy franchise that has been around for a while, right? But what's interesting about Strawberry Shortcake specifically is that when you think about toy franchises that are separated into generations, okay, like My Little Pony, Monster High, just name a few, all these franchises are run and directed by the same company. My Little Pony is always primarily a Hasbro thing. Monster High is always a Mattel thing. But for Miss Shortcake, every generation, every new incarnation comes basically from a completely different company who all have their individual takes on Strawberry Shortcake. And that's really what we're going to do here is go through all these generations, take a little trip through Strawberry Land, and I'm just really excited to finally do this because Strawberry Shortcake has quite a lot of sentimental value to me because she's been around for so long. It's something that I remember bonding with my mother over. Like, I grew up with Strawberry Shortcake as a small child, and so did my mother in her time. So it was one of those things that I was always just really excited to share with her. So we're just going to go ahead and start at the very beginning. But before we do that, first, we do have a word from today's sponsor. Thank you so much to Scentbird for sponsoring today's video. This wasn't really planned, but it's pretty great timing, isn't it? If you know Strawberry Shortcake, you know that a big part of her appeal is how good she smells. And that's important to me too. You know, I love dressing cute and colorful because that's what makes me feel happy and confident. And having a great scent on top of that is just the extra layer I need. Especially if it's a really cute scent. That's what I want, right? I want to smell like a Strawberry Shortcake doll. Finding the right scent can be a pretty expensive venture. Thankfully, Scentbird is a fragrance subscription service that allows you to try a new designer fragrance each month for just $17. With each fragrance, you get a 30-day supply to try out before committing to the price of a full-size bottle. They come in these really cute little bottles and magnetic cases that have a locking mechanism so they won't accidentally spray out in your bag whenever you carry them around. And they're just the perfect size too. You can slip them into a purse, a bag, your pocket even. There's tons of scents to choose from: perfumes, colognes, unisex options. So it's easy to experiment until you find the one that you think matches you the best. Because what's more fun than having a scent that's like totally yours, right? So some of my scents for this month: there's Love Me, the Silver Parfum from Choose. And you'll have to forgive me if I miss any of these pronunciations. But this one has notes of tangerine, rose petals, and sandalwood. It's really light, really sweet too, but not like overwhelming at all. Then also Lust in Paradise from Ex Nihilo, which has a lot of interesting notes: pink pepper, lychee, white cedarwood. It actually smells like a really upscale tea almost. I get like fancy tea party vibes from it, but in the absolute best way that implies. And also Peony Silk from Mare. This is definitely the strongest fragrance I got. It has peony, jasmine, and rose, and it's very floral, like just a wonderful, fresh spring bouquet. If you want to shop with Scentbird, make sure to click the link below or scan the QR code and use my code DarlingDolls for 55% off your first month at Scentbird. That's only about $8 for your first month. So thanks again to Scentbird for sponsoring this video. Let's get back into it. So, Strawberry Shortcake. Like I said, her origins date back to around 1972. The greeting card company American Greetings put out a Valentine's Day card illustrated with a young girl wearing a large bonnet. The artist behind this character was a freelance illustrator named Barbie Sargent, and at this point the little character was only known as Girl with a Daisy or Strawberry Girl. Well, Strawberry Girl ended up being pretty popular. The art director of American Greetings at the time, Rex Connors, determined that the secret to the success of this particular card was the strawberry motif. And he had actually done like legitimate market research up to this point that determined that strawberries were a very profitable thing to include on greeting cards. So by 1977, Barbie Sargent was tasked with creating 4 more cards to test this character out, and was instructed to make her as strawberry-ish as possible. The initial public reaction was very positive, and over the next few years, what started as just the unnamed creation of one artist expanded to become the work of several different staff members at American Greetings. Most prominently, Muriel Farian, whose art style and designs for Strawberry Shortcake are, I think, the most widely recognizable. Because of all the trade-offs happening in the company, if you ask who is the creator of Strawberry Shortcake, you're going to get different answers depending on who it is that you ask. From what I can tell, Muriel is most often identified as the creator, but obviously her Strawberry Shortcake wouldn't exist without Barbie's. And another illustrator named Francis Karyotakis is the one credited with the final paintings and illustrations. Lynn Edwards is named as the editor of Strawberry Shortcake, which meant she helped develop the characters and the storyline. So it's safe to say that Strawberry Shortcake was a group effort. So the first official iteration of Strawberry Shortcake is most identified by her sort of ragdoll quality. She has yarn-like hair, a button nose, very stylized, childlike proportions, and, of course, her iconic strawberry pattern bonnet. And even as Strawberry Shortcake changes hands and enters new generations, this version of her is still very heavily used on merchandise and promotional materials. She never really goes away, and for a good reason, right? This version is extremely adorable, extremely iconic, and incredibly memorable too. So important to mention here that Strawberry Shortcake's popularity as a greeting card character was not like unprecedented. As all of this was happening, almost simultaneously actually, American Greetings was having a lot of financial success with another character, Holly Hobbie, who in the late 1970s was one of the most popular licensed characters on the market. And that success was also Again, partially thanks to one Rex Connors. So it's safe to say that he had an eye for this sort of thing. So basically, American Greetings wanted to do with Strawberry Shortcake what they were already doing with Holly Hobby. And that officially brings us to Generation 1. In 1979, Strawberry Shortcake was officially licensed to the toy company Kenner, who produced the first 4 characters in the Strawberry Shortcake lineup. All were based on Farian's character designs. The eponymous Strawberry Shortcake herself, of course, her best friend, Blueberry Muffin, the male character, Huckleberry Pie, and the baby Apple Dumpling, who came with her pet, Tea Time Turtle. This very first wave is also identifiable by the fact that the dolls all have flat hands, compared to later Kenner dolls who all have curved hands in order to hold their accessories with. Now, if it wasn't already obvious somehow, the big thing with Strawberry Shortcake's theming was food, very specifically fruits, pastries, and sweets. The whole aesthetic was very cozy, very whimsical, just these food-themed children baking sweets and making friends and holding hands in this big food-themed world. So because of this, they decided to give the dolls a very unique and very iconic gimmick that would be used in basically every other generation too. All the dolls were scented. I tried to do some research into the actual manufacturing process of this, but I couldn't find an exact answer. I did find some interesting stuff though. So each manufacturer has had kind of slightly different techniques for making the dolls scented, but I think the most popular one that I could find is baking the fragrance into the actual plastic of the doll. And this is done with a fragrance that is plastic compatible so it doesn't fade in the factory process. And this is also the same with the doll's hair, too. So the plastic used to make the synthetic hair is baked with this fragrance and then melted and formed into the hair fibers. I don't know, I thought that was pretty interesting. That's why even with a lot of the vintage dolls, the scent hasn't actually faded too much because it's literally baked into the doll. Also, I should mention that the dolls were far from the only Strawberry Shortcake products. Girl was on everything. Clothes, bedding, accessories, a video game on the Atari 2600, as well as 6 television specials that ran from 1980 to 1985. To quote a New York Times article from 1982 about the growth of American Greetings, it's the single greatest attention getter they have. Royalties from the doll's sales will probably be the fastest growing part of the company's income next year. Some analysts expect the doll to ring up sales for licensees of up to $500 million this year. American Greetings' overall licensing revenues have grown from $4.3 million in 1979 to $7.1 million in 1981. So, as the capitalist empire of Strawberry Shortcake expands, so does the cast of characters. Along with the first initial wave of characters, Kenner also released a doll of Purple Pie Man, who was really more or less the villain of the cartoon series, and a bunch of other denizens of Strawberry Land too, some of whom would become series mainstays in other generations. By the way, big shout out to the website Ghost of the Doll. I'll link it below. It's an incredible resource for doll lines, especially from around this time. 1980 gave us Apricot, Lemon Meringue, Raspberry Tart, and Orange Blossom. 1981 introduced Angel Cake, Butter Cookie, Cherry Cuddler, and Lime Chiffon. Also another villain character, Sour Grapes. In 1983, we got the international characters, Crepe Suzette, Mint Tulip, Cafe au lait, and Almond Tea, as well as the twins, Lemonada. Then, after 1983, they started to do more themed lines. There was a dancing Strawberry Shortcake doll, the Party Pleasers line, where they all came dressed in cute party dresses, the Sweet Sleepers sleepover themed line, and in 1985 came the Berrykins line, where rather than pets, they came with little fruit-themed cherubs called berrykins. The berrykins line is also considered one of the most sought-after and hard-to-acquire lines from Generation 1, and I think it's because it just didn't get a very wide distribution. This is very much towards the end of Generation 1, and this would be the last full line from Kenner. Interestingly, though, there was a doll called the Berry Princess, the leader of the Berrykins, and she was very much like a standard, like traditionally sized fashion doll. And kind of just like that, Strawberry Shortcake vanished. No dolls meant no promotional cartoon specials, which meant no play sets or accessories, which meant no other merchandise. And it seems like almost sad to say it like that, but that's really just the nature of any toy line. The target audience of Strawberry Shortcake was anywhere from 6 to 12 years old when it first launched, and now those same children are 12 years to 18 years old. They've grown up and they're just not that interested in it anymore, and the next big thing has already come along for the next generation. So Generation 1 does officially come to a close in 1985. So before we start on Generation 2, we do have to take a quick detour, because the world of Strawberry Shortcake is actually a little more expansive than a lot of people think. So, outside of America, some countries got their own Strawberry Shortcake dolls, specifically Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico. These got distribution, it looks like, pretty widely throughout South America, but these three countries were where the manufacturing was based. And these weren't just like international releases, they were officially licensed to toy manufacturers in those countries that made their own Strawberry Shortcake dolls. Mexico's were made by Lily Letty, and they're the most similar to the Kenner products, but they do have some minor differences. Brazil's line, produced by Estrella, was extremely expansive and actually ran until 1992, so several years after the Kenner line stopped being produced. And it had some dolls that were based on the American characters, but for the most part, the line was entirely unique. And Argentina's is similar. It's not quite as expansive as Brazil's was, but it's a similar case in that the dolls are unique from the Kenner ones. Also, rather than being food themed, the dolls are all actually themed after flowers, which is really interesting. I don't have a lot of personal experience with the foreign dolls. I actually didn't even know they existed until just a few years ago. So I asked a friend of mine, Bon, to just kind of give me their thoughts, because I knew they did have a specific interest in collecting them, and I was just curious. So to quote Bon here, yeah, I think what attracts me more to the Argentine dolls is the flower theme. I just really love it. Even though it's kind of hard to get one that still smells good, the concept is just so much lovelier to me. The big curls on the Argentine dolls are also just so much more endearing than the original 80s dolls. The Argentine doll screenings are so much cuter too. They have this sort of sunburst appearance to their eyelashes that I love quite a lot. The next generation doesn't actually start until 1991, and it is the shortest one. This time, the license was acquired by THQ, who wanted to update Strawberry Shortcake for the 90s. And they didn't stray too much from the original vision, but they did make Strawberry Shortcake look, I don't want to say cuter, because she was already pretty cute, but definitely more modern, and a little more human-like too. As far as the dolls went, the most major difference was that they had bigger eyes. There was only one line of dolls, and there's not a lot of information about what exactly THQ's vision for this line was. There's a few illustrations that were made for it, but there's no like cartoons or lore or anything to go along with it. According to the doll boxes, the main gimmick was supposed to be that Strawberry Shortcake like came from her world to our world, and thus a lot of the dolls included a Strawberry Land outfit and also an extra one that was a little more modern styled. But THQ was unable to replicate the success of the original run, and this generation ended quietly after only a year. So Generation 2, for all purposes, ended in 1992. I do think the Generation 2 dolls are really cute, though. I'll give them that. And that brings us to Generation 3, which is very much my generation. This is the one I grew up on. Generation 2 doesn't officially start until 2003, but American Greetings had been putting out updated strawberry shortcake designs since around 2000 or so. And at first, they denied that they were going out for an all-out revival, but it wasn't long before they started to license her out again. And I think they knew they were just on to something this time, because they got some pretty strong licensing agreements right out of the gate. This version of Strawberry Shortcake was a lot more casual than her previous counterparts. She wears jeans instead of an apron and bloomers, and her bonnet has been changed for an equally iconic strawberry printed sun hat. So American Greetings found a way to really update Strawberry Shortcake for a modern audience, but still retained all the fun and the whimsy of the first one. It also helped that they were able to expand on this version with animated specials that would turn into 3 other full seasons, and a CGI animated movie a few years later in 2006, all produced by DIC Entertainment. This new generation is also a lot more character-focused. So the cast is a little smaller with very definite main characters in addition to more minor ones, because as a kid, it's very important to have a favorite character. Strawberry Shortcake herself has a lot more of a tomboyish personality this time around, and I think that's something that also separated Strawberry Shortcake from other doll lines that were really prominent in the early 2000s. There wasn't a big emphasis on, fashion or dressing up or shopping or makeup, which obviously I have no problem with. But it did provide a nice alternative to children who maybe didn't want their toys to be super fashion and appearance focused. And it helped with parents too, who maybe thought that dolls like Barbie or Bratz were perhaps a little too mature. But there was also Orange Blossom, who this time is seen as Strawberry Shortcake's closest friend, and often the kindest and most sensitive of the group. Angel Cake, who's classified as kind of the girly girl. She's very artistic and occasionally a little bratty too. She was my personal favorite, by the way. Ginger Snap, who's unfortunately kind of exclusive to this generation. She's hyperactive, talkative, and also the inventor of the group. And Huckleberry Pie, who is a boy. That's his personality. Boy. Dude. Male. That's really it. And the DIC series, it just is Strawberry Shortcake to me. The animated specials from the 80s are fun, but I just don't think they have the star power that this cartoon does. It is just so overwhelmingly warm and cozy and fun. I just love it, even as someone who is approaching 30 years old. God, I know. I could just sit down any day and enjoy a nice episode of Strawberry Shortcake Generation 3. It's not groundbreaking. It doesn't tackle any huge important issues. It's not Captain Planet. Angel Cake's cousin doesn't die of a drug overdose on screen or anything like that. It's so extremely low stakes, and everyone always ends the episodes as best friends who are baking sweet treats and giggling, and really that's part of the appeal, right? It's escapist in a way. Also, the best theme song, hands down. I already know you were waiting for me to mention it. As for the dolls, this time the license went to Bandai. And Bandai kind of struck the middle ground between the Kenner dolls and the THQ ones, kind of adapting what THQ started with the larger eyes and the more modern fashions. And maybe this is just nostalgia speaking, I can fully admit that, but I love the Bandai dolls. They're my favorite ones of all the Strawberry Shortcake dolls. I think they are so wonderful and so cute, and they're just everything to me. For the last season of the animated series, Season 4, the decision was made to actually age the characters up. So now they're all around 16 years old, with longer hair and more mature proportions and fashions. I'm not exactly certain why they did this, actually. This is only around 2006, 2007, so 3 or 4 years after this generation first started. And the target audience didn't age that much. But I guess they wanted to refresh the series and give it a soft reboot of sorts, and figured this was the best way. This change was reflected in the dolls too. The license would shift from Bandai to Playmates Toys, who would continue to produce Strawberry Shortcake dolls until 2008. And the Playmates dolls would be slightly taller and older looking, with, like I said, more mature fashions and facial screenings that had visible makeup too. The Playmates dolls are probably my least favorite ones. I think the proportions, especially in the face, are just so odd looking. Also, the Playmates run is kind of dubious because they just kind of totally ignore Orange Blossom and Ginger Snap. You know, the two most prominent characters of color in the main lineup, and produce dolls of basically everyone else. I'm pretty sure they both only got one doll in the Playmates run, both in the Winterberry Twist line, I think. Instead, Lemon Meringue and Rainbow Sherbet kind of step up to become the more prominent characters in the doll line, which, yes, both great characters, both smell wonderful, but it's definitely suspicious, to say the least. So as Generation 3 started to wrap up completely, Strawberry Shortcake decided to really more or less jump directly into their next reboot. Generation 3 ends officially in 2008, and Generation 4 starts the next year in 2009. And when the license went back up, it was ultimately Hasbro that American Greetings decided to give it to. And Hasbro's vision for Strawberry Shortcake is, I think, the most divisive. Controversial, even. And not just because it's recent and people tend to have the old thing good, new thing bad mentality, but it also seemed like a step backwards in what made Strawberry Shortcake so unique and charming in the first place. Hasbro definitely wanted Strawberry Shortcake to be more in line with what people tend to expect from fashion dolls. So the new designs were very feminine, quote-unquote trendy, and pretty dialed back on the food theming too. Encouraging healthy eating habits was a big thing around this time, so they really wanted to lean more into the fruit part of it, if it was mentioned at all. To quote a 2008 New York Times article, Strawberry Shortcake was having an identity crisis. The it doll and cartoon star of the 1980s was just not connecting with modern girls. Too candy obsessed, too ditzy, too fond of wearing bloomers. So her owner, American Greetings Properties, worked for a year on what it calls a fruit-forward makeover. Strawberry Shortcake, part of a line of scented dolls, now prefers fresh fruit to gumdrops, appears to wear just a dab of lipstick but no rouge, and spends her time chatting on a cell phone instead of brushing her calico cat, Custard. So, pretty immediately, there were worries that this iteration of Strawberry Shortcake would be too stereotypical, too superficial, too girly even. And while I think criticisms like that do tend to get out of hand, I don't think that in this case they were necessarily unwarranted. The Generation 4 character designs are not my favorite. I think what they did to Orange Blossom specifically is pretty heinous. Straightening her hair and also very noticeably lightening her skin tone. But all the designs as a whole, I think, are just very samey. They all have basically the same hairstyle, same face, same outfit silhouette, and they all just have very little personality. Generation 4 was officially launched with a movie in summer of 2009, The Sky is the Limit, which was followed by an animated series titled Strawberry Shortcake's Berry Bitty Adventures, which lasted until 2015. Oh, and the berrykins are back too, so there's that, except they look absolutely horrible. A lot of things look horrible in this CGI style, actually. I honestly think a good portion of the negative reception to this generation is just the animation style. It's not like unwatchable, but it's really janky, and like the 80s animation and the 2003 animation were so cozy and easy to watch, even as an adult, you know? As for the toys, they were very Hasbro in quality, which if you were collecting Hasbro toys in the late 2000s, early 2010s, you know exactly what I mean. But if you don't, that's to say they were acceptable and absolutely did not try to do anything more than that. I think the dolls are pretty similar to the Playmates ones, but with just better proportions. They're a little smaller in size and given a much more cutesy appearance to coincide with the new art style. And I think it works. Like, just to judge them as dolls on their own for what they are, yeah, they're pretty cute. Not amazing, not really doing anything new or different, but definitely cute. The full-size dolls were not actually really Hasbro's main product line for this generation, though. No, rather they focused way more on these smaller 3-inch dolls. These would get a lot of really cute, kind of Polly Pocket-esque playsets with rubbery clothes and everything, and I'm not mad at them either. I guess it works well with the theming too, since they're supposed to be like small. Yeah, Hasbro's run is, I think, fine. I have a hard time saying anything incredibly positive about it, and it was definitely regressive in a few ways, but like, fine. I just don't get the impression that Hasbro was really very passionate about having the IP or having the license in the first place. And in 2014, the merchandise license would pass hands once again. And this is a similar situation to Bandai and Playmates. So the cartoon, Berry Bitty Adventures, is still going on. The character designs and that specific storyline is still being retained. But now the dolls are being produced by the Bridge Direct. And these are by far the biggest departure from the original 1980s incarnation, I think. Character designs aside, because I said my thoughts on those, the dolls just look so generic and cheap. Like, the Hasbro quality already wasn't stellar, but these just go even further downhill. Bridge Direct would also make reproduction dolls, though. First in 2015 for Strawberry Shortcake's 35th birthday, which ended up being incredibly popular, so they started making more dolls in this classic style. I honestly remember seeing these a lot more than I did the dolls for Berry Bitty Adventures, actually. Now, where Generation 4 ends exactly is a little ambiguous and kind of confusing, because Berry Bitty Adventures does end in 2015, and Bridge Direct stops producing dolls not long after that. But the brand itself, it doesn't end there. In 2015, American Greetings sold the rights to Strawberry Shortcake to the licensing company Iconics, who at the time was best known for owning the rights to the Peanuts characters. Iconics bought Miss Shortcake for $105 million, and then almost immediately afterwards would allow another company, DHX Media, to acquire its entertainment division in 2016 for $345 million, granting DHX Media the rights to Strawberry Shortcake. DHX Media would later become known as Wildbrain, which is how I'm going to refer to them from now on. And in 2018, Wildbrain Studios would start producing animated shorts for YouTube in the style of Berry Bitty Adventures, but in 2D animation. And if you didn't know these existed, I don't blame you. I didn't either. I remember seeing them on YouTube, like, recommended to me and stuff, but I fully thought they were released around the time of Berry Bitty Adventures. I had no idea they were so recent, and also from a completely different company. But Wildbrain had other plans too in 2017, so a year before these animated shorts came out, actually, they publicly released concept art for a full CGI animated series to an overwhelmingly negative reception. This new style was panned pretty heavily for being too generic, too much like, basically every animated kids movie from the time. And by 2017, I think the public at large was getting fatigue from this art style and just the genericness of children's entertainment in general. But this was a character that now had several different generations of nostalgic attachment to it. So to see her like this, you can only imagine how that went. I don't know exactly how far this was in development, but the reaction convinced Wildbrain to take a step back and try again with their version of Strawberry Shortcake. And aside from the YouTube animations, they would go silent for a few more years. While this is going on, though, Basic Fun acquired the toy license to manufacture more Strawberry Shortcake dolls in the classic 80s style. So again, it's not like there was a hiatus. She's still around, she's still in the public consciousness, but we would have to wait a few more years before we got word of the new generation. And that brings us back to September of 2021, Generation 5. Officially titled Strawberry Shortcake Berry in the Big City. This one is instead a 2D animated project, and lanes away from the more fantastical aspect that the concept art seemed to have. Rather, the series follows Strawberry Shortcake as an aspiring entrepreneur who moves to Big Apple City, their version of New York, obviously, in order to fulfill her dream of being the best baker in the world. The primary characters this time around are Orange Blossom, Lemon Meringue, Lime Chiffon, and Blueberry Muffin. And while I don't love the character designs of this generation, at least not all of them, I do think they're definitely an improvement on the concept art. They do at least have a lot of personality. Like, you can tell from looking at them that the Orange Blossom of this generation is friendly and sporty. Blueberry Muffin is sweet, girly, a little ditzy. Lemon Meringue is a strong-willed mechanic. Lime Chiffon is intelligent and excitable. I think to some degree, maybe they're a little generic, but they work, they do the job. I think, again, some things were maybe just a little over-corrected, and it's a little weird seeing some characters just completely different. Like Lemon Meringue, who was always portrayed as one of the most frilly and girly girl characters, suddenly be this rough, almost mad scientist Rainbow Dash type. I don't know, it is a reboot, I can't really be too mad about that though. The series itself is, well, I have mixed feelings on it. Like when I think Strawberry Shortcake, I think, fun, comfortable, cozy, whimsical. But the Wildbrain series is just really high energy, like always at 100% all the time.
It's just a matter of time before we turn on each other for survival.
The humor is often just like really random or slapstick, and I just never really felt like I was watching Strawberry Shortcake. That's probably my biggest criticism. That said, I don't think it's bad. I think the people working on it are really in love with what they're doing. You can always really tell when the staff of a show is just having fun. The show is also really committed to diversity, including representation wherever they can of different races, body types, gender expressions, and types of families. And the show is cute and sweet and wholesome in all the ways it needs to be. So it's not bad at all. I think the first few episodes in particular are pretty rough and kind of hard to watch, but it did really grow on me after a while. So for toys, it was announced that Moose Toys would have the license to produce dolls for Generation 5 of Strawberry Shortcake. And that was said in the original announcement back in 2021, but I don't know what happened. I honestly don't, but we did not get those dolls, and I'm not sure if we'll get any dolls, actually. I mean, I hope so. I honestly think dolls would endear me to this new generation a lot more, because, hello, right? But there just haven't been any updates on them that I can find. There was one doll made, not by Moose, and released exclusively in Brazil. So there's that. As for the future of Strawberry Shortcake, Generation 4 recently got a Netflix special titled The Beast of Berry Bog, which was animated in CGI, and honestly, looks really good. Like, full props to them, this movie looks incredibly well animated. And the toy company Loyal Subjects was licensed to produce more dolls in the Generation 1 style, which should be releasing pretty soon. So we are getting dolls in some fashion at least. And that brings us to now, 2023, almost 2024. I think it's safe to say that Strawberry Shortcake is in a pretty good spot. She has something good for kids and a lot of nostalgia products for adults as well. Her empire, her gigantic strawberry printed crown is not toppling anytime soon. And I'm fine with that. It's Strawberry Shortcake's world. I'm just living in it. So now it's your turn. Tell me which generation of Strawberry Shortcake is your favorite, which one is your least favorite. Also, if you were in charge of a hypothetical Generation 6, what would you do for Strawberry Shortcake? Tell me all about it down there in the comments. And when you're done with all of that, just be sure to like and subscribe for any future fashion doll content. Thank you.